Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Greetings, everybody. My name's Chris Adams, Head of Research and Insights at Miles Partnership, and I'm going to be facilitating and helping out with this webinar today. Welcome to the more than 600 destination and tourism marketing professionals who've signed up for today's webinar from over 20 countries. So welcome in everybody from San Francisco to Samoa, and all across the rest of the world. So 2020 has been a year like no other in our industry, a year of unprecedented crises impacting travel and tourism, of course, driven by a once in a 100-year health event. And so first and foremost, wherever you are joining us from, we hope you and your family are safe, healthy, and protected. So we at Miles have been very fortunate to team up for the last 5 years with our experts and good friends and colleagues at Focusrite and identify the sort of trends, the challenges, the opportunities reshaping travel and how DMOs need to respond. And for this unprecedented year, we've got an all-star team of industry thought leaders from both companies, and it's a real privilege and pleasure to be joined by Pete Como, Managing Director of Focusrite and a veteran of fast-moving travel tech space, and of course a key figure at their Focusrite Executive Conference and other conferences they run around the planet, which is a hugely influential conference, and we're actually drawing upon some of the key insights today. Backed by popular demand is Mark Bluestein, who joined us on the pre-COVID edition of this webinar last year and closely follows the latest in travel research as a senior analyst at Focusrite. And I'm also delighted to be joined by Laura Libby, our senior VP, who will help me offer commentary and recommendations on what it all means for destination marketing and management organizations and other tourism organizations. So we know many of you online today, so there's some real familiar faces and the people who've registered, but some may not be familiar with Focusrite or even Miles. So let me pass over to Pete to briefly introduce Focusrite. Pete, welcome in.
Thank you very much, Chris. We are excited to be here. This is always one of our favorite events of the year, so thanks for having us again. For those of you who don't know, Focusrite is a market intelligence company that assists leaders across the travel industry make smarter decisions. Hundreds of companies access thousands of our research reports through our open access research subscription, and they access our proprietary sizing data and startup data through our focal point visualization tool. We also produce a number of industry events, as Chris mentioned, where we provide a platform for industry executives to gather, network, and do business, leveraging our marketplace research to build interactive programming. And lastly, we cover the most important daily news in our travel industry on FocusWire through articles, video series, podcasts. Unfortunately, way too many online events this year, but we're fighting through that and much, much more. So thanks again, Chris, for having us. We're excited to be part of this.
And thanks to you and the team. And let me briefly introduce Miles Partnership, and the 250 odd staff and team members at Miles are really privileged to have worked alongside our friends, colleagues in the destination marketing space and hospitality, etc., during such a challenging and unprecedented time. So Miles has been around for almost 70 years. It's grown into a global marketing and advertising agency from our roots in Florida. And we've got clients big and small, from Brand USA to Branson, San Francisco to Samoa, and 100 other leading destinations and travel brands. In fact, I think it's more like 150 across the planet. Now, all the slides and links to the research, and there's going to be a lot of resources we're going to share with you today, will be available online. You can see the web address right there. And we're also going to send out a follow-up email to everybody who registered for today. It's a little bit early or late in various parts of the world, but please feel free to share the recording and the resources with your friends and colleagues. So there's so many challenges and opportunities that have been driven by this unique moment of 2020, we could have chosen 25 trends, but with Focusrite's expert research and analysis, we've narrowed it down to focus on these 5 critical trends for how travel will be reshaped by the pandemic. So let's jump right in and get Pete's. He's going to take it off first in terms of the trend of how technology is meeting the moment of the crisis. So over to you, Pete.
Great, thanks, Chris. So trend 1, contactless tech meets crisis. So contactless refers to technology that minimizes the need for personal interaction. It should not be surprising that during the time of an airborne virus that spreads from one host to another, any technology that can minimize face-to-face interaction is gaining adoption. So I'm going to start by looking at contactless through the lens of the traveler, and then we'll detail how companies are bringing this type of technology to life and then what the future holds. As part of a survey we fielded over the summer, we asked travelers about their primary concerns when planning leisure travel within the next 12 months. And of course, we're still in the midst of a pandemic. The fear of contracting COVID is running high. And this is a top concern for consumers when planning their leisure and business trips. And this is true in the US as well as in Europe. The fear of contracting COVID is prevalent for both the risk of becoming ill while in transit, as well as while in destination in both the US and Europe. And in both geographies, it's higher for in transit, where people feel like they have less control of the situation versus in destination. Maybe the most interesting finding from this survey is that travelers are more enticed to travel by a decreased infection rate at the destination than the actual availability of a vaccine. And part of the reason could be the time that it's going to take for a vaccine to be spread through the population. And also a vaccine is a means to decrease infection, while it is most important to travelers to actually see the end result. So travelers are viewing contactless tech as important within all industry segments. So here's a look at transportation. We asked consumers how important contactless check-in, ticketing, and payments are when planning transportation. And in both the US and Europe, just over 40% said that contactless options are essential. For lodging, hotels, and short-term rentals, we asked consumers how important contactless check-in and check-out are when planning their stays. And in both the US and Europe, again, just around 40% said that these are essentials. For attractions and activities, we asked how important contactless ticketing or purchases are. And in both the US and Europe, again, just over 40% said this is essential. So that 40% number is extremely significant to be considered essential. We never see that type of data as a research firm. Within attractions and activities, where vouchers are still commonplace, a bit more work needs to be done to provide some of these contactless services. So safety and security, clearly top of mind for travelers. We're seeing implementations of technology that enhance safety and security accelerate throughout the customer journey, from airports to airlines to hotels to corporate travel agencies. These technologies are automating the process that helps keep a traveler or employee safe and or secure. Some of these are in direct response to the pandemic and maybe overkill once we get on the other side, but still we see safety and security as a trend that was already important pre-pandemic and has simply accelerated as a result of the pandemic. Contactless technology is one of the most important aspects, with 40% or more of consumers deeming it essential. For example, zeroing in on lodging. So Singapore-based Vouch is a startup that has developed an app-less, chat-based digital concierge that hotels use to increase revenue, elevate guest experience, and improve their productivity. Vouch streamlines item requests, facilitates time slot booking for gyms and pools, facilitates room service, and instantly answers frequently asked questions through an artificial intelligence-powered backend. But it isn't only startups that are innovating in the contactless space. Google and Amadeus have implemented programs with hotels and airports to facilitate a contactless experience. Connected Trip is another category of tech that facilitates the contactless experience. One of the more interesting players working in the connected trip space is Journera. Journera is attempting to tie all elements of a trip together by working with travel players, both large and small, and allowing them to share customer data through their data exchange platform. So, for example, a customer would board a flight and automatically be checked into their hotel, receive a digital key, or their rideshare could be adjusted automatically because the flight is delayed, and so on. And lastly, we have biometrics, which again can help bring contactless journeys to life. So biometrics include fingerprints and facial recognition that make each person unique and identifiable. And there's actually a growing comfort level with biometrics among travelers in the US and key Western European markets. Just over half of business travelers are comfortable with fingerprint scans and facial recognition for checking in and entering hotel rooms, and just about a third of leisure travelers. So Clear is a company that you've probably heard of that provides airports with kiosks to use biometrics, eyes and face, rather than traditional ID documents to confirm identity. They're now working with dozens of airports in the US and expanding to other sites like event venues. And the next step in the evolution of Clear is integrating health information to identify if an individual has antibodies or has been vaccinated. So in summary, close to 90% of travelers find contactless travel essential or nice to have when it comes to transportation, accommodation, and activities. Contactless tech is in high demand and likely to stay if it succeeds in taking away pain points in travel. And lastly, travelers are becoming increasingly comfortable with facial recognition and other biometrics. So Chris, I'm going to hand it back to you to share some of your thoughts on contactless tech.
Yes, thanks, Pete. So a quick summation of the implications and opportunities for destinations. What does it all mean for you? Well, DMOs need a nuanced approach to this space. So we need to balance the opportunities of technology with the fundamentals of travel, including ensuring a warm welcome and a unique personal experience and interactions in your destination. Obviously, at the moment, the pandemic in health and safety is paramount. So both for mitigating risk and in being clear to visitors and locals on these health and safety measures, including the application of technology, we need to be focused on the areas that Pete has emphasized. Our research has consistently shown that clear and consistent messaging, as well as obviously real actions around pandemic mitigation, is critical. And we need to overcome widespread confusion and concern, which is impeding the recovery of travel. I'm going to have more on this on the next section. But, and I want to emphasize this other part, longer term after the pandemic, destinations need to think about the enduring value of personal connections and the personal touch. Even as more of our travel goes high tech and contactless. So investing in and supporting your visitor centers, for example, and the staff that are in them, concierge services, and making sure that we've got other vibrant, engaging situation where visitors can enjoy personal services and interactions. They're all going to become more important. And we've seen during the pandemic that personal interactions are being actively sought out by visitors, with huge growth in call and reservation phone interactions across many of our clients. People are seeking information, advice, and guidance. So the bottom line is that high tech and high touch are both critical for DMOs, supporting the technology where it adds convenience, speed, and safety, but perhaps even more importantly, understanding that travel is still fundamentally a people business and that these authentic personal interactions with locals are going to be even more cherished and important when the pandemic passes beyond the horizon. And hopefully that will be early in 2021. So let's move on to trend number 2, meetings and events reimagined. And Laura will be coming in from the Miles side to offer commentary. Let's move on.
Great, thanks. So trend 2, meetings and events reimagined, virtual and hybrid. What a difference a year makes in the meetings and event industry. We were indeed riding high at the end of 2019, breaking records and experiencing growth outpacing GDP. In 2019, travelers on average took 7 annual meetings or event trips with an average annual spend of just under $4,500 and a median per event spend of $1,200. Internal meetings and big events like conventions, conferences, or trade shows were the most attended, but travelers were most likely to attend multiple internal or external meetings throughout the year than any other type of business gathering. Then came the 2020 pandemic, and reality set in as major meetings and events like Google and Facebook canceled some of their biggest conferences in February. And for the travel industry, the cancellation of ITB Berlin, the industry's biggest trade show of 150,000 attendees, was the ultimate sobering moment. Hotels reacted in early Q2 by establishing cleanliness commitments and protocols and by partnering with household cleaning and disinfectant brands such as Lysol, hoping to spark some confidence in travelers and meetings and event attendees. However, so far these initiatives have failed to restart meetings in any sort of scale. And in 2020, revenue impact on hotels is clearly significant. Our estimates project hotel room revenue down over 50% and meeting and event hotel room revenue down over 75% compared with 2019. So as the end of 2020 nears, many questions remain unanswered, and the impact and uncertainty of COVID-19 continues to haunt all stakeholders in meetings and event travel. The question of when the industry will return ultimately will depend upon a complex mix of science, government, employer policy, and traveler confidence. Meetings and event travelers are eager to get back to business once opportunities return, though. 9 in 10 are willing to attend meetings and events, even if the threat of COVID-19 hasn't been fully resolved. And only 23% plan to cut back travel to only attend essential meetings or events. If the decision was only up to travelers, the outlook for the industry return would be much rosier, but unfortunately it's not. Travelers are indeed eager to get back to business. Only 1 in 10 are unwilling to attend any meetings and events until the threat of the disease is resolved. And less than 1 in 4 plan to cut back their travels to attend only essential meetings and events. The vast majority of travelers, 9 in 10, will adjust at least some behaviors for the COVID-19 environment. Response to how the COVID outbreak will impact how they plan to get there, what types of meetings they'll attend, and where they'll sleep varies across travelers. So not surprisingly, if you look at the top couple of bars on this chart, over a third of travelers will only travel to an area or region with a lower incidence of COVID-19, and a similar percentage will only travel domestically. However, as we look towards the bottom, only 10% said they will attend smaller meetings, avoiding big conferences or conventions, and even less will avoid staying in the hotel where the event meeting is taking place. Once again, if the traveler were driving the decision, the outlook for the recovery of meetings and the hotels where many of them take place would be much brighter. And the impact is truly enormous. Room revenue from meetings and events will decrease to $7.3 billion at the end of 2020. We anticipate that this will double in 2021. However, this will leave us less than half of where we were in 2019. And full recovery back to 2019 levels is not anticipated until 2023. Destinations are, for the most part, taking a cautious approach to reopening events. Some are waiting for coordinated standards, while others are rethinking how to manage multiple events at the same time, kind of building these clean zone type bubbles. What is clear is that better coordination is ultimately required. Some hotels and destinations, in particular in Asia, where COVID-19 cases have been better managed, are giving us a glimpse into what the near-term and potentially long-term future of events might look like. Just last month at the Focusrite conference online, we produced a panel discussion in partnership with the Marina Bay Sands at their new hybrid broadcasting studio in Singapore. And you can see how the moderator and two panelists were live and a third panelist was beamed in virtually. Well, there was no live audience for this particular panel. However, we used Marina Bay Sands for an event in October where we hosted 50 attendees live, in addition to hundreds attending through an online conferencing platform. So we anticipate that even after the pandemic becomes controlled, venues will need to consider how to bring together live and virtual audiences, as conference producers are betting this trend is here to stay. So how much does the decline and ultimate recovery of meetings and events impact the destination? Clearly a lot. Return for leisure and leisure extensions are common, and destination location is a big driver. And leisure travel is for real. In fact, over 3/4 of meeting and event travelers added leisure extensions at a rate of nearly 3 trips per year. And there is some FOMO that drives this leisure spend. This is a clear indicator that business travelers who don't extend feel like they're missing out. And this results in over a third of business-only travelers indicating that they would visit for leisure in the future. And equally as important, much of this is incremental leisure business, which would not have occurred if there had not been a meeting or event in that destination. 27% would not otherwise have visited the destination had it not been for the meeting or event. So as a quick summary, meetings and events will not likely recover to 2019 levels until 2023. Meetings and events have a significant impact on leisure expenditures due to trip extensions and future visits. And near-term meetings and events will be smaller in size, food on the go, strict sanitary procedures, and many of these trends will extend longer term, in particular, the trend toward hybrid events. Laura, over to you for some commentary.
Yeah, I think there's really three sort of key takeaways from what you've talked about here and what we've seen. The cleanliness campaigns, we see those, a lot of destinations and convention centers really showing the bubble concept, a la the Major League Soccer or NBA type bubble. We know there was confidence in that self-contained environment. I think that's a really important trend as we look to the near term. We know that that reassures both planners, destinations, and attendees that there is some safety regulations in place there, and that coming to those meetings is a safer way to sort of re-enter that. However, we know on the long term that we need to be thinking more still about the things that make our destinations unique, because in the long term, we'll still need to be competitive. And I think that's one of the big key takeaways across all of this, is that while meeting windows, booking windows are shrinking, they haven't shifted to an entire in the year booking for the year meeting. So we're still looking out into the future, even into those 2023, 2024 times when we can see some changes on the horizon to look back to where things had previously been. And as Pete mentioned, the hybrid meeting is here to stay. There are so many benefits to this that I think we'll see, whether it's the expanded audience, you have people attending that maybe have never been able to attend, or the speakers, as Pete mentioned. You can really bring in new and different speakers that maybe weren't able to travel or meetings couldn't afford to have brought in. You have that opportunity. But I think it really is imperative on the destinations to create those unique moments within the virtual experience so that we can still drive the destination interest, that FOMO Pete mentioned, so that those leisure extensions are added on, or at least become part of the bucket list of places people want to travel, even once they've attended a virtual event. So ultimately, as we look at this, we need to create safety, but we also know that competition will remain key to our long-term growth and really having the meeting planners' eyes and those meetings booked into our destinations.
Very good. Thanks, Pete and Laura. So we're actually going to pass it over to Mark now to have a look at the leisure travel recovery. So Mark, what are you seeing in this space?
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for letting me join the webinar again this year. So yeah, we're seeing kind of a lot of different things pretty much. As Pete mentioned, kind of in any year where we do our research, we generally ask travelers in our syndicated studies or consumers why they haven't taken a trip. All we see is that health concerns is generally a reason for about 10% of consumers, and economic 30% from consumers. It will keep them from not traveling. And what COVID-19 pandemic has done is made those natural concerns even more pronounced, that, as Pete even showed before, that even the idea of traveling is kind of uninspiring, between the idea of having to maybe contract it in the destination on the transit or even while you're there. But one benefit kind of for travel and the rebound and looking at leisure coming back is it's something positive people want to do. Travelers enjoy the idea of traveling. It tends to be where they want to spend their discretionary income, which we have seen both in the US and Europe as generally being above other purchases. And it's because travelers consider it an important part of their life, and the pandemic has not shifted that. So this chart is showing from that study we did over the summer about the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we see that across these 6 markets, a high percentage of travelers still agree that it's an important part of their lifestyle. But even with the love travelers have for traveling, there's still a lot to consider between the precautions they need to take with COVID-19 and their own health concerns. So this has led them to kind of change how they travel this year. And we think some of those changes may even go into next year, whereas we found in a loyalty study we did that US travelers now are more likely to start considering different brands to use in future travel considerations, possibly due to the more consideration they're putting on the health and safety precautions that these brands are providing. But one way that these concerns have manifested in travel this year is what we see a stronger rate of domestic travelers. Here we see across our markets we surveyed over the summer that travelers were already willing to travel domestically. And we see that about 1 in 4 across these markets were already comfortable. And this was significantly higher than the percentage that said that they were willing to travel internationally. And if we think of those concerns of COVID in different countries and traveling, each country has its own restrictions, making it harder to understand and adapt. One thing I will add, this study was done over the summer, so a lot of the futuristic trends over the 6 months in January, even 12 months, may not be as high as they were back then, as we have seen a lot of the upticks in many markets that have been surveyed in COVID-19. But beyond just the shift of higher domestic travel, we also have seen that road trips have become popular, whether it be RV or different types of car. But one of the main things that we've seen is that there's a stronger appeal for car travel, specifically when a traveler is using his or her own car, higher so than maybe either renting a car or using an Uber and Lyft. And in a normal year, the most popular kind of mode of transportation for leisure travel is airplane. And for that, we have seen maybe less of appeal, possibly due to the lack of kind of open destinations that they can go to. And with those destination shifts, we've also seen a higher rate of travelers kind of looking outside of the city. And when you look outside of the city, it also kind of shapes the type of accommodations you're taking. So what we've seen is an increased attractiveness for rentals. Rentals, which aren't always as booked at a high rate as hotels, are becoming more attractive as travelers feel they have more control over the space themselves. They own it's the whole home rental. They can control who's in and out and probably not have to deal with either shared lobbies or shared spaces of the elevator. But as Pete also showed in that first section about the contactless, we've also seen shifts in behaviors, kind of very quick shifts around technologies. As Pete showed earlier in his slides, we've seen a higher rate of travelers that were willing to kind of use contactless or even view it as essential. When we compare this to a study we did last year, we actually see that travelers were not too comfortable releasing information. So when we asked travelers, would you be willing to release information to travel companies about past vacations, apps, or social media content? We see here that not really a significant percentage of travelers said they would agree to give this type of information. Fast forward to the summer of 2020, and we actually see that a significant percentage of travelers now would agree to be willing to travel for enhanced health screenings for COVID-19. And enhanced health screenings could mean whether it's rapid tests at an airport, downloading apps at a new destination, or giving personal doctor information to either government bodies or hotels. So this is kind of just a shift in the mindset of the traveler, just so they can keep traveling. And then as Pete showed earlier, there is a higher use of maybe contactless, a simple contactless thing that travelers could even use, maybe interesting keyless entry for room access. So instead of even going to a front desk and getting that key, you can use your app. And what we saw late last in 2019 is that about a third of European travelers and only 40% of US travelers were interested in keyless room access. Now, when we fast forward to 2020, we actually see that almost that same percentage now view this as essential. A third at the lowest mark of France and Germany say it's pretty much essential that hotels can now should have keyless access, and that goes higher for travelers among US and UK. And then kind of like finally, one of our older trends was the idea of kind of even going humanless or frictionless, kind of how Pete showed that contactless, the idea of using it at hotel check-in, maybe doing it with a kiosk, or as some markets have even adopted full automated robots, or even doing it for airport directions. What we found is across markets, there really wasn't significant interest. We see that there is a high percentage among travelers from France, but not so much in Germany, in the UK. And now when we looked at it, as Pete showed in the earlier section, travelers almost view contactless ticketing, check-in as essential. It was around the 40% mark for essential for either lodging, attractions, or even modes of transportation. So it is really these quick shifts, just because of the adapting that consumers had, is something we think is going to continue as travel rebounds, whether it's travel providers or even in-destination experiences that are now going to adopt a higher tech usage for the future. So now we'll pass it over to Laura.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Yeah, so our research and analysis during the pandemic has emphasized that recovery is going to be built upon and driven by locals. Locals, because we need their support as our foundation during lockdowns and obviously travel restrictions. We need locals engaging with local businesses over in the Northern Hemisphere is going to be a tough winter. So whether it's shopping or dining, either in person, if it's appropriate, or remotely and contactless as needed. So we're going to need locals to both support local businesses and to feel comfortable reopening their community to visitors. We're currently research that we've been doing every couple of weeks with our good friends at Longwoods highlights we have a real challenge. We're going to need the support both for when the moment is right in the recovery from this pandemic to reopen and to welcome back visitors, but also longer term, when tourism is back and growth returns and community support may be tested in other ways. And we need locals to welcome their friends and family back. So our research with Longwoods has highlighted this fundamental truth that travel restarts with VFR travel being front and center. You can see it there, number one, in terms of travel plans over the fall and early winter. This is US-based research. So visitors look to head to where they feel most comfortable and welcome. And of course, we need to ensure that it is safe and healthy. And there's been a lot of public warnings in the last few weeks in terms of family gatherings. But when the time is right, VFR travel, usually by road trips, is how we're going to see the restart occurring. So road trips marketing is a real cornerstone of domestic tourism marketing. We see it all over the world, from where I'm joining you in New Zealand, all the way through to Europe, across the US, many of our US state clients, and here in Canada, this example. So there's lots of great campaign ideas to leverage in this space. But we also see emphasizing again the importance of providing clear, consistent information. The Canadians have a sort of easy to use single portal for information on travel restrictions, health and safety protocols across the country. Australia also has an integrated national approach to grouping all this reopening and recovery travel advice in one place for all their cities, states, shires, and districts. And this sort of one-stop shop is going to be fundamental to tackling this challenge of confusion and concern that I mentioned before. And it's vitally important for the recovery in the US, where despite the great efforts of US travel and their Let's Go There campaign, and they do have access to some information in terms of links off to external sites, there's still this incredible patchwork of city, state, county restrictions, and that's creating a major impediment to travel. And to reopen international, and so to all our friends at Brand USA, to all the other national tourism organizations around the world, they're obviously focused on this area. And we're going to need a real effort in this space: science-based health and safety protocols, modulated border management, and clear, consistent messaging, and frankly, a degree of international cooperation that we haven't seen to date. So while building and nurturing local support is fundamental, it hasn't traditionally been an area of focus for DMOs, but arguably absolutely has to be now and into the future. and helping plan the recovery is a critical step for all of us. We need to also come together and work with national and international entities around this reopening strategy. So helping them rise to the challenge of a smart, nuanced reopening protocol and approach. And this is going to be a big test for our industry, governments, and the global community to get international travel restarted in a safe, appropriate, and broadly supported way. And we need to get this right. So let's move on to our fourth trend. We're going to welcome back in Pete again to talk about tours and activities. Over to you, Pete.
Great. Thanks, Chris. So trend 4, tours and activities, paradigm shift, small, virtual, and digital acceleration. So in today's pandemic depressed tours and activities market, size truly matters. Travelers are most open to tours and activities that minimize interaction with staff and other visitors, that promote physical distancing and increase the perceived safeness. Through stay-at-home orders and government lockdowns and restrictions, and after months of social distancing, doing your own thing, i.e. engaging in a self-guided tour or activity, has the most appeal. And this is true across all age groups. People trust themselves more than they trust anyone else. We asked travelers to indicate whether the COVID-19 outbreak has made various types of tours and activities more or less appealing. And self-guided is the clear winner. Private and small group tours and activities still elicit some anxiety from some travelers. So travelers in the more vulnerable age groups and those who are generally risk averse are most likely to exhibit a drop in appeal for those private and small group tours. Travelers are especially going to be less inclined to sign up for excursions with large groups or to visit big attractions that might attract large groups of people. So heavy crowds in pandemic times are particularly uninviting, given their relative safety implications. But what is leisure travel without experiencing some of those touristy things to do in destination? This is often the reason why people travel. It's not the experience of flying, the transportation from the airport, the staying in the hotel. It's all the things they do when they get there. So in today's pandemic times, how are travelers scratching that destination attraction and activities itch? Well, some are turning to virtual experiences, and suppliers and destination partners are trying out these virtual experience offers. For example, Airbnb and Brand USA partnered on a collection of online experiences, which Chris will talk about in a little bit. But are these virtual experiences actually satisfying the desire of travelers to experience the destination? Well, the review scores indicate that the guests are really enjoying the experiences, but the small number of reviews indicate that there is just not a whole lot of overall interest in these virtual experiences. And even one of the tech giants is dipping its toes into the world of virtual experiences. Amazon launched Amazon Explore a few months back to a small bit of fanfare and probably some shaking in the boots of the tours and activities distributors. But was this virtual experience play the plan all along for Amazon, or was this designed to be physical tours which were forced into virtual because of the pandemic? Regardless, a quick analysis of the reviews on Amazon mirrors some of the same conclusions as Airbnb experiences, where the reviews are resoundingly positive, but there's a very, relatively small number of reviews. So how about digital transformation for the tours and activities sector? In 2019, we forecasted online penetration to be in the low 30% for tours and activities, so a bit behind some of the other sectors. But during the pandemic, there's been a rapid increase in general retail as far as digital shopping and purchasing, as physical stores remain limited capacity. On-demand food delivery has exploded. In the attraction section, time ticketing has become commonplace to limit capacity. So that's forced providers to adopt technology to implement and has also forced travelers into these online booking platforms. In the tour segment, since a large percentage of these tours are booked in destination, travelers are becoming more accustomed to using mobile devices to make purchases and reservations. And we see that this will increasingly become the default. And the future of virtual experiences, our belief is that they are unlikely to take off as standalone products. However, due to the rapid digitization of the segment, they can become an effective part of a pre-trip or a post-trip marketing strategy. So as virtual reality content increases, which we're starting to see some signs of, tours and activities companies can use it to increase conversion on the front end and potentially increase loyalty on the post-trip side. So in summary, tours and activities are down, but not out. And it will always be a primary reason why travelers travel. The small self-guided tours is the pandemic winner, but larger attractions will bounce back once the pandemic recedes. And virtual experiences are unlikely to explode as a standalone product, but can be an important part of a marketing strategy. And lastly, digitization, and in particular towards mobile devices, will continue to accelerate. Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Pete. And Pete sort of cast a realistic, somewhat modest tone about the potential of these virtual experiences, but we do believe that this is a step change for virtual experiences. So obviously during the pandemic, it's met its moment. It sort of helps scratch that itch that Pete talked about. And this includes real-time streaming video, which allows you to obviously visit, whether it's the beaches of St. Petersburg, Clearwater, or go on a tour of Paris, or take an underwater exploration of reefs in Hawaii. So in addition to the analysis of reviews that Pete referenced, you can see actually on the bottom right there that no dates are available. So there seemed to be a relatively strong demand for some of the experiences that were on offer at Airbnb. And as Pete mentioned, that is part of their new virtual experiences platform that Brand USA and other DMOs have been partnering in. And in terms of Amazon's new Explore platform, so that's very much solving both a technology issue, but the all-important distribution strategy, where these big platform partners, such as Airbnb and Amazon, really get these experiences out to large numbers of people. So we think it's worth experimenting and expanding the use of these technologies into new and powerful areas. And if we actually have a look at some research that we've been doing with the State of the American Traveler, with our good friends at Destination Analysts, we've been asking the question about these technologies. And you can see here that over half of all US travelers indicate that they're using real-time video at levels significantly higher than they were before the pandemic. And if we move over to online virtual tours, such as virtual reality or 360 experiences across a range of technologies, but particularly emphasizing Google Street View. Of course, they've got the distribution channels worked out incredibly powerfully through Maps and search and other platforms. And Google's empowered the availability of this for any DMO, or indeed anybody, to contribute and update Street View and create your own virtual tours. So that has the opportunity to obviously offer these technologies well beyond this. And we're in terms of the research, we see again that the use of virtual tours, whether they be VR or 360s, are being enjoyed significantly more. Over 4 out of 10 are indicating they're interacting with it more frequently during the pandemic. So we think that this is a step change and perhaps even a paradigm shift in terms of the use and impact of virtual experiences, where they can deliver value, not just during the pandemic in lieu of travel, but indeed once the pandemic has passed, having a look at this concept of hybrid. So offering virtual experiences, which could be things like virtual famils to meeting planners in the travel trade, or immersive experiences for leisure travelers to help them prepare for their trip or to share their experiences with friends and family once they return. So there's all sorts of hybrid opportunities to integrate virtual experiences into your marketing and communication for yourself, for meetings, for tourism businesses, etc. Okay, and we're on the home straight here. So our fifth and final trend is future-proofing the industry, and very much the critical issue of building back better. How do we make tourism that comes out of this pandemic more sustainable, more resilient, and more widely shared in the benefits? And so over to Pete again, and then Laura from our side will offer her comments. Take it away, Pete.
Great. So the last trend, future-proofing the industry and building back better. So what does the future hold? Will some of the behavioral changes that we are witnessing today stay with us as we move beyond the pandemic? So here's a quick few bullets from our research, some of which we've reviewed in the earlier trends. Shared transportation has lost appeal, but some of this may be short-lived. Other changes will likely be more permanent. For example, as Mark mentioned, flying is likely to continue to carry with it perceived health risks due to crowded airports and airplanes. Large hotels are still facing pandemic-specific challenges. And lastly, the type of travel that minimizes encounters with others has jumped to the top of the popularity list. And car travel has, road trips clearly a big trend, in particular when we realized some of the pent-up demand back in the early part of the summer. And car travel is appealing to travelers who like to control their own environment, but more so with travelers, again, as Mark mentioned, who own their own car or who know the owner personally. Rental cars declined in appeal for a quarter of travelers due to concerns of adequate cleaning and concerns about prior renters as the risk factors. Shared transit is losing appeal. Travel's biggest segment, which is air travel, has lost luster, but 66 to 75% of travelers still expect to fly by the middle of 2021. But COVID will leave a lasting impression on air passengers. More than 2 in 5 agree that the pandemic will permanently alter how they think about flying. It may not deter them from air travel in the future, but they'll remain conscious of health concerns evoked by COVID-19 and possibly retained heightened awareness. So we convened a think tank of industry leaders at the Focusrite conference a couple of weeks back to establish what are the biggest friction points impacting travel recovery at the moment and what can we do about them. Clearly, we lack a coordinated industry voice and instead have relied on individual efforts, such as testing protocols on certain flights and routes. We lack relevant information delivered in real time at the right time to fill in information gaps. There's a logical role for technology to help address this. Time horizons are really complicating inventory and yield management, as the planning cycle is much longer and the booking window is much closer in. And ultimately, travelers lack confidence. And until they feel safe to travel, recovery is going to stall. So how can the industry and destinations implement strategies to speed up recovery and help future-proof against the next crisis? So our friends at Future Proofing Next offered up the pyramid of possibility and helped us brainstorm the basic strategies at the foundational level, and then bold and bulletproof and ultimately future-proof strategies to help us avoid another industry shutdown when the next crisis arrives. So at the basic level, we discussed cleanliness protocols and kind of a unified lobbying effort. And as we moved up to the bold level, we discussed some of the frictionless technology as well as health passports to help increase travelers' comfort levels. For future-proof, we discussed the need for kind of a John Hopkins style dashboard of traveler data and a public-private partnership to create that industry voice that can really impact some of these structural changes. And lastly, how can we truly build back better and apply boldness to climate change, enhance the traveler experience, and regain traveler confidence through an industry-wide communication effort? So there's clearly a lot at stake for our industry, and destinations play a critical role in helping us move up the pyramid. It seems we are we are taking care of the basics and starting to be a bit more bold with the proliferation of contactless tech and early launches of health passports. But the top two levels seem to be a bit further off. And, is now the time where we can shed some of our old challenges, such as over tourism and, producing large carbon footprints, and embrace real change? Can destinations fully embrace the role of stewards of destination management and move away from the often misguided historical metrics of room nights and total visits? So I know I am yearning to escape my bubble here in Denver, as I'm sure Laura is. I'm sure that's the case for all of you and millions of other travelers. So how we manage this pent-up demand will speak volumes about what the future truly holds, and whether we can implement change, or whether we just slide back into some of the bad habits of years past. So Laura, I'm interested to hear some of your thoughts on future proofing.
Yeah, I think the whole presentation, and especially this part of future proofing, definitely has talked about some key ways. And I think competition obviously is something we talked about a number of places in here, how to stand out while people are looking for some of the same reassurances in their travel selections. But looking forward into the future, we think that idea of coordinated voices is really important. Those partnerships that were forged this year during this hard time are going to be necessary going forward as well. We think having the strong social media presence to give that real-time view of what's happening in the destination or at the meetings is important for the reassurance level, but also to show off what's happening in a very safe and exciting way. I think we've talked a lot about the frictionless areas of contactless, if I could say more lessons, tech in that mix. But I think customer service is still going to be a very key differentiation point for travelers making decisions, that they know they're going to be taken care of and that they understand what's going to happen. Looking though at that top part of the pyramid, those bold steps that we could take, I think really looking at how climate change can be connected to the traveler experience brings us to the sort of final two takeaways from this section. As we look at car travel and road trips continuing to have such a strong presence, it's a really unique opportunity to look at how can we work with partners to see electric cars integrated into that mix. There's such a rise in available charging stations that make the cars that can already travel further distances be able to go a little bit further, and for that to be a more reassured travel experience. But also rental car fleets are starting to really expand with those options for electric cars. And I think this is really a great way to overlay those itineraries that exist with that additional information around how the electric car can fit into this, because that is one area that can really still provide the private vehicle transportation, still have the traveler experience with their families on a road trip, but having a better impact on our environment. The last one is really looking at something we've been doing with our partners at Civitas and Tourism Economics, and then the Now Group as well, looking at future funding. And one of those areas that I think really speaks to that top point of future proofing on the pyramid is the regenerative programs. If we look at outcome-based funding models that really are related to revenue that is targeted to support the destination, whether that's the community, social, or environmental assets, I think is a really important piece as we look to come back stronger. Obviously, funding is a key element to coming back stronger, but if we look at places like New Zealand, who have a visitor arrival fee that is in collaboration between tourism and the Department of Conservation together, then we're really looking at how the natural environment is such a key part of the visitor experience, the local experience, and obviously a finite resource in that mix. So protection of that being important to travel and tourism, and then people coming to see that and marrying those together to find regenerative programs for funding. I think these things together really give us a way to look forward and be bold within work that groups are already doing related to road trips or funding or working together with partners. So we're excited about what the future of travel looks like, even though right now it looks very different, but I think we're going to come out stronger as an industry.
Thanks so much, Laura. So we've got a couple of questions, and before we come to those in our final few minutes here, let's just remind you about some of the resources that are available. And we've already emphasized that all of the information for these 5 trends are going to be available both in terms of the slide deck and a variety of links. We're going to highlight a couple in a moment here. They'll be on the website address here, plus emailed out to you. And Focusrite has curated a list of research and resources. Pete, do you want to highlight anything from the set that you've put together for people here?
Yep. So yeah, there's some free resources there. Obviously, we'll distribute this deck, and we've created an offer for our kind of Path to Recovery series, which is 3 kind of curated consumer decks. So we have a discount included in here for anybody that's attending this webinar, but lots of great reports that are on this list.
Thank you. And just a reminder again to check out our COVID-19 education portal. You can see the address in the top right, or available from milespartnership.com. And this has got a range of research from a wide variety of our research partners and practical resources, case studies, which we're keeping up to date on the latest in pandemic research and insights from all of those partners. And road trips. We've talked about road trips today. There's a whole special summary section and research available on that. And absolutely fundamental, and Laura's just been talking about funding. A reminder about our major funding futures and funding for tomorrow research projects with our agency partners and support from all the leading DMO and tourism associations across North America and in Europe. These reports, and there's a summary, in-depth reports and webinars, which gives you a whole range of options and opportunities for DMOs to consider in building back a more resilient, sustainable. And there's also quite a number of global case studies around the issue of regenerative tourism funding. Okay, so in terms of our Q&A in the final couple of minutes here, we had a couple of questions that came in, which I briefly answered, but Saba was asking Pete about At Your Gate, which is a technology I'm not familiar with. I know you cover so many different technologies at the Focusrite conference. Any comment on them and that area?
Yeah. So At Your Gate, Grab, Airport Sherpa, Deliveroo. These are some of these kind of on-demand, mobile-based delivery services at airports where you can order food. Logically, I think consumers are becoming comfortable with food delivery. That's happened in earnest during the last few months. Grubhub, Uber Eats. So I'd say, as far as kind of at airport, I think yes, there will be a trend, and we already see it in some airports where you're sitting down ordering from iPads. You may be at a restaurant, you may not be at a restaurant, and getting food delivered. So I think travelers are becoming more and more comfortable with this, and logically in a contactless time, I think that only will accelerate. Another question, Chris, that came in was Jamie asking about the vaccine and how come we haven't mentioned the vaccine. I think as our research shows that it's really about the decrease in COVID-19 in the destination, and the vaccines certainly will ultimately help that. I read this morning that a vaccine can kind of be analogous to a fire hose trying to put out a forest fire. And unfortunately, the forest fire is burning bright right now, especially here in the States. And until the vaccine is penetrated and starts bringing down the COVID levels in destination, I think we'll see those things kind of work hand in hand with each other. So yes, it does become a confidence builder as it starts to be distributed and penetrate the population. So I don't know, Chris, if you have anything else to add on that.
Yes, I think you've hit the nail on the head that vaccines provide an optimistic outlook for 2021. But as everybody understands, with how herd immunity works, we need to get the vast majority of residents and travelers, obviously near 100% through things like health passports, but even a vast majority of residents inoculated to ensure that we've got transmission down to incredibly low levels, which is going to build back confidence.
Yep. And one more thing, Chris, Kelly Powers asked in the chat about, governments are really making the decisions about meetings and events right now. And that is true. And I think as Laura and I discussed during the future proofing session, it's really going to take a unified voice and in some ways a lobbying effort. As we start to see more events being produced, we're going to have some learnings, and it's going to be really important for the industry to come together and help educate our governing bodies that meetings and events can be produced successfully within all destinations. But it's a good point that really governments are making that decision in many places right now. So you're a little bit at the mercy of gathering rules at the moment. Yeah.
And I emphasize the critical importance of industry, government, and community working. So we've come to the top of the hour, our fifth annual year ahead review with Focusrite is now at an end. Please take advantage of all those resources. Thanks so much to Pete, to Mark and the whole team at Focusrite, and to our very own Laura, but most importantly to all of you for joining us today. Be safe, be well, protect your family, and we look forward to reconnecting, hopefully in person in 2021, and have a wonderful holiday festive season. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.